So I know that we've been covering in the last maybe 24 plus hours a lot of the news about the Jack Smith videotaped deposition. The video has since been released. The transcript has since been released. The transcript is 255 pages. The video is about 8 hours long. I have gone through the transcript at least once. And I will tell you this, there is just some incredibly powerful testimony that was provided by former special counsel Jack Smith that is worth emphasizing about Donald Trump's guilt, criminal culpability, complicity, co-conspirator role in not only the classified documents, violation of the Espionage Act, federal criminal prosecution in Florida, but also the election interference case that was run by special counsel Jack Smith out of Washington, D.C. Those criminal cases, as you know, came to a screeching halt courtesy of the uber conservative 6 on the United States Supreme Court with their ruling concerning the liability of a president. And also this kind of rule that you don't prosecute a sitting president of the United States. So it's a little twofold, right? It's the Supreme Court of the United States. It's also the fact that Donald Trump made it back into the Oval Office in November of 2024. But I actually want to focus on a different part of the Jack Smith deposition because it's the thing that the Republicans are trying to use as a red herring right now to distract the American people as to the incredibly powerful evidence that existed and currently exists, frankly, against Donald Trump that would have resulted in his guilty verdict by a jury of his peers should these cases have gone to trial. And the component of Jack Smith's deposition that I want to focus on deals with the toll records, the cell phone records that were subpoenaed and obtained when it relates to members of Congress. And the Republicans in Congress, senators and congressmen, they've kind of lost their shit about this. And they're trying to make it seem like this was some huge politically motivated, targeted thing that was done by Jack Smith at the behest of Merrick Garland, Joe Biden, the Democrats. And I'm here to tell you, as Jack Smith swore under oath and provided in his deposition testimony, there's no there. And you may ask yourself, Katie, why are you even bothering to spend any time on this if there's no there? It's because I want you to be empowered with the knowledge and the evidence and the information so that when your MAGA-loving friends, family members, and others are trying to sit there and tell you that there was some huge invasion of privacy that occurred by Jack Smith, you're prepared to tell them that is 100% a crock of shit. Now, I'm going to make some citations to the deposition transcript itself because I think it's really important. But let's just start generally with kind of some basics here, right? Jack Smith was deposed December 17th, 2025. In a letter dated October 23rd, 2025 through his lawyers, Smith offered to testify publicly. That was shut down by the Judiciary Committee, the chair being Jim Jordan. No big surprise. And now that we've seen not only Smith testify via the video that we've watched, but now we've read his testimony, now we know why Republicans would have been terrified to have that happen in real time. There is something to be said about it, how still having a value that we're able to see it, but it clearly would have been better if it had been done publicly in real time. Anyway, there's a few things here that I want to look to in the deposition transcript that I think are worthwhile spending time talking about. But let's just also kind of high level talk about the much ado about nothing that the Republican lawmakers have created. Because remember, this is also the crux of a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, a criminal investigation, threats to be able to criminally investigate and prosecute Jack Smith for not only his role in his prosecution of convicted felon Donald Trump, but also concerns about what the hell went on here with these phone toll records. Okay. So back in September, on September 27th of 2023, there's an FBI document, and I'm going to pull it up right now on your screen so you can look at it. And this FBI document is unclassified, and it basically says, and it references Arctic frost, which was the investigation into election interference, right? And it says that there is an FBI special agent whose name has been redacted, and that person conducted, quote, preliminary toll analysis on limited tolls records associated with the following United States senators, and it lists them: Mike Kelly, Lindsey Graham, Bill Hagerty, Josh Hawley, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, Ron Johnson, Cynthia Loomis, and Marsha Blackburn. Now, that's it, and that's all that we have. And Chuck Grassley referenced that letter. And basically, we know that back in 2023, investigators obtained the toll records for these particular lawmakers, and those toll records were scrutinized and analyzed. But here is the crux of the nothing burger. Okay? And I want to have the dramatic pregnant pause here. The toll records only showed date and time of phone calls, did not show content of those communications. These were not text messages that were received and analyzed by the FBI. These were not the wiretap listening and recording to the audio of these conversations in these calls. This was simply date and time of phone calls. Now, Jack Smith, in his investigation into Donald Trump's election interference, right? In that case, Jack Smith and his team looked into the phone calls that were made by and between lawmakers and Trump on the evening of January 6, 2021. Why? Because part of Jack Smith's theory of the case is that Donald Trump was, at the 11th hour, as we know, during the throes of the January 6th insurrection, Trump was reaching out to congressional Republicans in a last-ditch effort to be able to convince them to hold the illegal line, the unconstitutional line, and not allow the certification of the election results to happen. And so if you look at the indictment against felon Trump that was brought in 2023 concerning the election interference case, it alleged that there were multiple attempts made by Donald Trump and all of his alleged co-conspirators to reach out to Republican senators and congresspeople to be able to convince them to not go through with the certification process. And those communications, those outreach were done via what? Via phone. So of course, when you're building a case, part of your investigative kind of profiles include looking into verification and who was talking to whom when and how, not necessarily what was being discussed. And that is a really important nuance. And that is why all of this insanity from the Republicans and why you see them spending so much time in Smith's deposition, like all of the real estate by the Republicans was either you were politically motivated, weren't you, Jack Smith? He's like, nope. You did this just because you wanted to get to Donald Trump because somebody told you to do it. Nope. You illegally looked into all of these Congress people's phones. And he's like, nope, just got date and time of calls. Now, again, the indictment against Trump, the 2023 indictment argued, or it alleged that Trump, quote, attempted to exploit the violence and chaos at the Capitol by calling lawmakers to convince them, based on knowingly false claims of election fraud, to delay the certification. And remember, special counsel Jack Smith had a 2-volume final report, as all special counsel do. They create these final reports. Other special counsel reports, like, those looking into Joe Biden and Robert Mueller's special counsel report, right? Those are all made public. But, Judge Cannon down in Florida, she's putting her thumb on the scales of justice to benefit Donald Trump, and she's refusing to disclose volume 2 of Jack Smith's report. But volume 1 has been publicly released. And you'll recall that report argued, basically, that Trump would have been convicted if not for him winning the 2024 November 2024 presidential election. But it also specifically identified phone calls made by Trump and members of his inner circle and his co-conspirators to be able to convince Republican lawmakers not to certify the results. Okay, so I kind of wanted to take a mini detour for a second and go to a specific citation here in the transcripts because I thought it was important. It's page 85 of the deposition transcript, and I just thought this was powerful. So forgive me for taking a little bit of a detour, but this is what he says. He being Jack Smith. And this is in response to Jared Moskowitz asking him about retribution. And Jack Smith says, page 85 starting at line 13. I have no doubt that the president wants to seek retribution against me. I have no doubt that's the intent. He goes on line 20, same page. So I am eyes wide open that this president will seek retribution against me if he can. I know that. I don't frankly connect that with this hearing, as in the deposition he was giving back on December 17th. I don't have any connection. I came here. I was asked to come here. Fast forward to page 86, line 4. I will say I agree that this department, as in the DOJ, led by Pamela Joe, law lackey extraordinaire, I will say I agree that this department wants to seek retribution against anybody who worked on cases against President Trump. And folks, I really wanted to just say that out loud. I mean, I know it's obvious to those of us that are actually paying attention to what's going on, but the courage it takes for somebody like Jack Smith to want to testify publicly and to come forward and give this testimony knowing that Donald Trump has announced that he wants to have a criminal investigation. He wants to see Jack Smith arrested. In fact, look at this headline, right? Trump saying that he wants prosecutions of Jack Smith. The only thing Jack Smith did is what, folks? He just, I don't know. He secured indictments and he prosecuted Donald Trump because the facts and the evidence, as Smith has testified, supported those indictments in those cases. Now, when it comes to the toll records, again, I want to go back to the depo testimony because I think it's very important. Starting on page 93, I want to focus stuff right here, okay? So, and again, this is a little bit in the weeds, but it's important because the Republicans tried to make a lot of hay out of this toll record thing. And I want you to understand why there is literally nothing there. So the question to Jack Smith is the following about subpoenaing then Speaker Kevin McCarthy's toll records after he became House Speaker, because the records sought were from November of 2020 through January 8th of 2021. So the question to Jack Smith was, what were you looking for with McCarthy's records? Like, what did you do with the information you obtained? And Smith answered the following way. So the relevance of those records, there would be several examples, but his contacts with either co-conspirators, the president, or conduits of information to the president was relevant to our investigation. An example I could give you is on January 6th. We had information from Mark Meadows, who was present for a call where Congressman McCarthy was asking for help. McCarthy was asking the president to come to his aid while the Capitol was being seized. Getting the exact toll records for when that happened, as in the call, when that call happened, was relevant for our investigation, both to question other witnesses about it so we had an accurate timeline, and also to corroborate that the call happened at approximately the time witnesses said it happened. Question, but it's pretty significant to subpoena the Speaker of the House's toll records, right? Answer from Jack Smith. We followed department policy. We followed all legal requirements in getting those records. Question, I mean, to get the information you're looking for, nobody disputed the Speaker and the President were having communications on January 6th. So one way you could have gotten that information is you could have asked the Speaker's lawyer to look at his phone records and give you the information you needed, right? And here comes the incredible 30-plus year experience as a federal prosecutor, Jack Smith's answer. And I, as a fellow former prosecutor and as a trial lawyer, appreciate this response. This is on page 94, line 16. Well, you say now that nobody is disputing, but my experience in criminal investigations is that people often at trial dispute things that you never thought were going to be in dispute during the investigation. And so when I conduct a criminal investigation, I don't assume there will be no disputes. Let's stop for a second there. I mean, right? I mean, would you ever go half-assed into a trial? The answer is no. You would never go half-assed into a trial. You over-prepare, folks, and I would expect nothing less from somebody who is of the caliber and the integrity and the preparation and the skill of Jack Smith. Smith goes on at line 20. Having a record that is a hard record about a time. And the timeline of that afternoon was particularly important because the violence had started. The president refused to stop it. He endangered the life of his vice president, and then he's getting calls. And not calls from Democrats, not calls from people he doesn't know, calls from people he trusts, calls from people he relies on. And still, Trump refuses to come to the aid of the people at the Capitol. That is very important evidence for criminal intent in our case. Moving forward to page 95, this is it, folks. This is the case. All of the Republicans making this big hay about these toll records, spending the bulk of time that they could spend with Jack Smith, not asking Jack Smith about the guilt of Donald Trump, his culpability, his complicity, his fingerprints, his DNA, over all of the stuff that happened on January 6th, all of the stuff leading up to the election and after the election and everything, and the classified documents, right? Not asking about why there were classified documents in the shitter at Mar-a-Lago, but they want to question the legality of the obtaining of these toll records. And Jack Smith on page 95, line 7 says this: "We got these records in a manner that was consistent with the law and consistent with department policy. There was nothing improper about how we got these records." I mean, folks, you cannot make up shit and make it stick against Jack Smith when there is nothing that man did wrong. Nothing that he did wrong. Later on page 95, they ask him, as in they asked Jack Smith, well, what about with Representative Perry? You could have contacted his lawyer. You could have said, this is what we're looking for. Can you help achieve this without seizing his phone? Because there is only one member of Congress that got their phone seized, and that was Representative Perry. Line 18, this is what Jack Smith does in his answer. He says, well, with Congressman Perry, I should point out that the seizure of his phone happened several months before I was ever special counsel. I wasn't involved in that process. Line 23, I'm not going to speculate on investigative steps that occurred before I became special counsel. Page 96, there has to be a reasonable basis to believe that there's going to be materially relevant evidence. And that is why Jack Smith got those toll records. Okay? So let's just keep on moving forward a little bit together, okay? Line 7, this is what Jack Smith tells in an answer about, again, ad nauseum, the toll records being obtained. Well, I can tell you that, for example, there was contact on, for example, January 6th. But again, another example for you is Mark Meadows. When we interviewed him, he referenced the fact that afternoon, Chairman Jordan, and you guys know this is great, right? Because Jim Jordan is sitting there during this deposition of Jack Smith. And every once in a while in the deposition transcript, you can see Jim Jordan interjecting and trying to act like he's like some big man on campus, even though his sorry ass looks like he's just some juvenile child trying to sit there and pick a fight. Right? So Jack Smith says the afternoon of January 6th, Chairman Jim Jordan was in contact with the White House. And like Congressman McCarthy's contact with the White House, it was relevant because, again, Mark Meadows stated that these were supporters. These were credible people that the president relied on. And what I recall was Meadows stating that I've never seen Jim Jordan scared of anything. And the fact that we were in this different situation now where people were scared really made it clear that what was going on at the Capitol could not be mistaken for anything other than what it was. And it goes back to that sort of information from someone who is a credible source to the president, proving that actually happened and that there's actually a record of that call and exactly when it happened and what actions happened after that or didn't happen after that, extremely probative to our case. And then on page 98, Jack Smith says, I don't have any reason to believe that the subpoena was secured for any improper purpose or that it was secured in contravention of Department of Justice regulations or the law at that time. Powerful, right, people? Now, I just want to kind of cite a little bit more to you. And this, I think, is a great way for us to kind of maybe wrap up our conversation about this. This is on page 102, starting at line 18. And Jack Smith is being questioned. To the extent members of Congress and senators are up in arms that this happened to them and they're seeking accountability, who should be held accountable for answering these questions? And Jack Smith answers, well, I think who should be accountable for this is Donald Trump. These records are people. In the case of the senators, Donald Trump directed his co-conspirators to call these people to further delay the proceedings. He, as in Donald Trump, chose to do that. If Donald Trump had chosen to call a number of Democratic senators, we would have gotten toll records for Democratic senators. So responsibility for why these records, why we collected them, that lies with Donald Trump. Certainly, my office did everything consistent with the law and department regulations at the time. To the extent you think something needs to be changed, that change happened, but that was not required at the time that we issued these subpoenas. I mean, folks, so Jack Smith underscoring the following realities. He legally obtained the toll records of Republican members of Congress. He did not obtain the audio tape conversations. He didn't obtain the text messages. It was date and times of calls. He did it as a part of an investigation that was built to bring a criminal prosecution that was successfully obtained from a grand jury. And it was and would have been a successful prosecution to verdict of convicted felon Donald Trump. And as we hear Jack Smith say in his deposition testimony that you just read to you, if members of Congress, if Republican senators and congressmen have an issue with their cell records, the toll records, the date and time of those calls being obtained by Jack Smith, they should take it up with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump himself ordered his co-conspirators and Donald Trump himself made phone calls to delay, to make sure that those election results were not certified on January 6th. Why? To further the conspiracy to achieve the end goal of him staying in office. End of story. Thank you very much for your time today. We don't even need to get it any further. Folks, with what I've given to you, you should be able to shut down any bullshit that is raised by MAGA lovers telling you that there was something incredibly criminal or violative and some type of wrongdoing that was, occurring on the watch of special counsel Jack Smith. It's bullshit. It's a false narrative, and it doesn't fucking fly. Be mad, be outraged, fake people. It is 2026. I'm going to demand accountability every damn day until we have justice achieved. If you haven't liked and subscribed, do so now. I'm Katie Phang. Phil Weiser is the Attorney General for the state of Colorado, and he's also running to be the next governor of Colorado. And he has been going toe-to-toe with the Trump administration. More than 45 lawsuits and counting since Trump took office in January of this year. But it's not just defending the rule of law. It's not just fighting back against the Trump administration. Phil Weiser has also focused his gubernatorial campaign on affordability, public safety, the environment, civil rights, the things that all of us deserve and that we're struggling to have under this particular regime. I had the chance to sit down with Attorney General Phil Weiser to talk about some of the litigation that he's doing and to also explore his background a little bit and why it makes him the next best governor for the state of Colorado. And joining me now, I have the privilege of being able to spend some time with the Attorney General for the state of Colorado, Phil Weiser, who is also running to be the next governor of that great state. Attorney General, it's good to see you. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Katie. Great to be with you.
Yeah, listen, you have definitely been on our radar for a long time. I want to kind of take a short trip down memory lane, if you don't mind humoring me a little bit. One of the kind of bigger high profile things you had to deal with in the last few years was when the state of Colorado had some challenges as to whether or not Donald Trump was even able to appear on the ballot to run for president of the United States. The Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, was somebody who was involved in that litigation. It was definitely something that you were backing as well in terms of supporting the idea that Donald Trump should not have been eligible to even appear on the ballot. We know what the Supreme Court of the United States did with that. In fact, you and I, when the news broke of that SCOTUS opinion went live together. I think I was filling in for my good friend Ari Melber at the time. Thoughts about where things have evolved since then? You clerked for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm not sure if people know that, but I think it's very important for them to know. And you've served as the Attorney General for Colorado. You're involved in multiple lawsuits against the Trump administration. Did you ever think, Phil, that we would end up in 2025, at the end of 2025, where we are in terms of where we used to be?
Katie, there's so much to the moment we're in that is jaw-dropping, that is mind-blowing, and that is hard on all of us. I want to pick a few of the threads and pull them through.
Please.
First, the role of the state of Colorado in that litigation was an important one, and sadly, it could still be relevant. Colorado has the following legal position. It's the one that we argued at the Supreme Court. If someone is ineligible to be on the ballot, the state of Colorado says they shouldn't be listed on the ballot. Let me give you a very clear case. If President Trump were to run for a third term, we've heard a lot about this. My position in Colorado is he doesn't get to be on the ballot. That case would end up going before the Supreme Court because Colorado law is clear. If someone is ineligible, if they're too young to serve, they don't get to be on the ballot. We have to make sure we honor the rule of law in our Constitution. And part of what's so, again, hard to grapple with is these basic constitutional principles. The commitment to the rule of law itself, it is in the balance. And at this term at the Supreme Court, there are a number of crucial cases. And you mentioned my late great mentor, RBG. She'd be turning over in her grave, even that we're asking, if you're born here in the U.S., are you guaranteed citizenship in the 14th Amendment? That's been decided for over a century. It's now back at the Supreme Court. Can the president essentially take the position that tariffs can be created, changed, and the law requires there to be an emergency, a justification? Well, this president hasn't bothered with that at all. And will the Supreme Court make sure that the rule of law holds? We're going to see this is a crucial time for our republic. To your point, I believe in the rule of law. I believe that we live in a democratic republic. And as Ben Franklin famously said, we have a republic as long as we can keep it. It's up to all of us to make sure we keep our republic.
So, Attorney General, I wanted to stay on this issue of Trump versus Anderson for just a second. That was the case that ended up in front of SCOTUS, because I'm sure it was incredibly frustrating to go through all of the kind of remarkable evidentiary findings that we had from the state of Colorado that Donald Trump himself incited an insurrection that took place on January 6th of 2021. That makes Colorado unique in terms of those evidentiary findings. And then to be told that the states are given deference for how they run their elections. But then the Supreme Court says, nope, sorry, Colorado, Congress is actually the ultimate arbiter of who ends up being on these ballots. It kind of had to be it kind of cheats Coloradans, don't you think, of their ability to be able to govern themselves. And it kind of flies in the face of small government. But I just curious how you felt about that.
Katie, I got to go back to January 6th and just recall how horrific, unprecedented, and scary that day was.
Sure.
Jason Crow from Colorado knew his life was on the line. People were out to kill Mike Pence, Nancy Pelosi, and others. And political violence in this country is on the rise. Obviously, January 6th is a particularly horrific day signifying that threat. We have to condemn that threat. And the violence that day was urged by the president, whose quote, I believe it was, when he was told by the Speaker of the House, please say something, Mike Pence's life is in danger. The president refused to say anything. And Congress had the chance to impeach Donald Trump for what I believe is as problematic an action we've ever seen a president do, seek to undermine the peaceful transition of power, seek to encourage a riot that was harming law enforcement officers. Congress had that opportunity. It was before the Senate. Mitch McConnell will, I believe, live to regret, maybe he already does, that he didn't do what history, I believe, called for in that moment, which is to say that conduct is so disqualifying, we shouldn't allow this person to occupy the Oval Office. That's what I wish had happened. Obviously, it didn't happen. And what Mitch McConnell said at the time was there's a criminal process that will hold President Trump to account. And then, as we know, we didn't see that process get started. The January 6th committee started, and that should have been a bipartisan committee, just like Iran-Contra was bipartisan. This was a threat to our basic system of governance. It called for a commitment to preserve government of the people, by the people, for the people. Only a few brave souls, obviously Liz Cheney among them, were willing to break party lines to do what was right for the republic. And finally, there was an effort when a special prosecutor was appointed to investigate crimes. And we've now come full circle. President Trump is once again in the White House, and he pardoned everyone who committed those crimes on January 6th. Some of those people are out there committing additional crimes. Law enforcement officers have died because of what happened on January 6th. We have to take seriously this principle. The rule of law depends that we will fully and faithfully enforce the law. And just to add more insult onto this injury, qualified, dedicated members of the FBI, of the Department of Justice, were fired simply because they did their job investigating crimes that happened on January 6th. And now we're seeing pardons being given out like candy because people are well connected and can pay a bunch of money to somehow get the right people to push them forward. That's not what our system of justice was designed to be. If you look at the Supreme Court, it says equal justice under law. Whoever you are, political party, rich or poor, you get treated fairly under the law. That's what the rule of law means. That's what we have to uphold.
And that's what you've been doing as the Attorney General for Colorado. You don't just talk the talk. You're walking this walk. You are now leading a myriad lawsuits, at least 40 of last count vis-a-vis this particular administration, to defend Coloradans specifically. You are making sure that certain basic constitutional rights like birthright citizenship, et cetera, that those are respected, but that the separation of powers is something that is also respected. More than 40 lawsuits in county that you have been a part of. I had a two-part question for you. One, how critical is it the role of Democratic attorneys general? I have had the chance of speaking with some of your colleagues, running the gamut from Rob Bonta to Matt Platkin to others, William Tong. You guys are all really kind of the vanguard. You guys are the ones that have really kind of been leading the charge to defend Americans, your constituents, but like Americans, I think at large. And then number two, how important is it then to take that energy and translate that into being the governor? Because we've seen governors now that have to be the vanguard, right? They're the ones that have to stand in the breach and defend their citizens of their states against an unruly, unlawful, and disrespectful and incredibly cruel administration.
Katie, you might think about this moment as calling for fighters. And the question is, do we have fighters or do we have folders? Do we have people who stand for the principles of our Constitution and of America? Or do we have people who are willing to accommodate and try to make nice? In my race for governor, obviously I bring my 45 lawsuits and counting, my commitment to fighting for what's right and being clear about standing for our values. And I'm running against someone, Senator Michael Bennet, who voted for more of Trump's cabinet than almost any Democrat in the Senate. And as you're shaking your head, that's exactly the right response. We don't need people who are pushing an agenda that says, well, let's try to build positive relationships with people. Maybe they're going to be okay. You can't normalize this behavior. There was nothing normal about January 6th. There's nothing normal about Project 2025, about ending birthright citizenship, about breaking the law right and left. We need moral clarity. And you've seen governors, J.B. Pritzker comes to mind, who are very clear. We're not letting a federalized National Guard come to our state. We're not going to allow the mistreatment of the LGBTQ community. We're going to make sure that we defend the rule of law and we do what's right. And that's something that attorneys general and governors need to be clear on. It should be bipartisan, just like the review of what happened on January 6th should be bipartisan. This is about the basic principle you said. We live under a government of laws. We cannot live under the whim of whoever happens to be president who thinks that their executive orders are law. Executive orders are not law. The Constitution is the ultimate law. And you made a very important point about separation of powers. A lot of our lawsuits are because there's law that Congress passes and the president says, I'm going to disregard that law and withhold money, for example, and punish Colorado. That's not the way our system works. I'm fighting for Colorado. We're in court and we're winning.
And I was also pleased to see that several of the pillars of your campaign to be governor aren't just focused on fighting back against the Trump administration. You're also focused on affordability for Coloradans. You're focused on public safety and the environment. I mean, these are things that it's funny because I just saw a headline, and this is a great segue to this question to you. The headline was from an Axios piece from just maybe like yesterday or something. And the headline was the following, Attorney General. It was, quote, "In Colorado, progressives challenge establishment Democrats for party's future." Your take on that headline, you think it's accurate? Would you label yourself as being a progressive, or is it more the policies that you're advocating for?
One of the important distinctions right now is, are you a grassroots fighter? Are you standing up against this lawless bullying administration, or are you going along? Are you someone who tries to accommodate or make nice? And I will tell you that distinction is crucial. I know who I'm fighting for, the people of Colorado, and I'm not afraid to take on anyone. To your point, I've taken on this president 45 times, often on issues that are pocketbook issues for people here in Colorado. The tariffs are obviously a big example. People are paying more because of these illegal tariffs. Another issue is I challenged a grocery store merger between Kroger and Albertsons that was going to raise people's prices for food, that was going to hurt local farmers, that was going to hurt workers. And I took on these billion-dollar companies because I heard from the people of Colorado. We did 19 town halls across Colorado. We went to court. We helped stop that merger. I've been taking on RealPage, setting prices for tenants who are paying in Denver over $130 more a month because of this collusion that is happening using this algorithm that RealPage is sharing private information between companies who should be competing, not colluding. Coloradans want a fighter. They want someone who puts them first, who's not afraid to take on anybody. That's how I've been operating as Attorney General. That's how I'll operate as governor.
What about moving the space headquarters? Like, that's wild. And that's direct retaliatory, retributive conduct from this administration because they're mad. They're mad that you guys won't share voter roll data, which is compromising personal and confidential information. They as in the Trump administration, they're pissed that you guys are fighting back when they're trying to take the space headquarters away from Colorado Springs because they're mad, because they don't like that you're not playing ball.
Katie, you raised a great example there of why we need a governor who knows the law, who's committed to the principles of our Constitution and is not afraid to fight for them. Because there are people in Colorado today, even some Democrats, who say, can't you just try to make nice and say nice things? Maybe they'll throw us some crumbs. I disagree completely. When you're up against a bully, you don't take their punishment. You don't let them take your lunch money. You punch them in the nose and say, I'm not going to be treated this way. And in this case, this is what was said to Colorado. I don't like your mail-in voting system, which the president said was automatically crooked. That's a lie. We have a safe, secure, national model of voting. It's a gold standard. We're not going to change it because the president threatens and tries to bully us. In fact, the authority to set our voting system is ours in the Constitution. And when the president tries to take away our authority, tries to undermine our sovereignty, my answer is I'm going to fight for it. That's why I'm in court by myself in this case, fighting against administration who's trying to punish Colorado, who's trying to intimidate Colorado. As Attorney General, as governor, I won't be intimidated. I'm going to fight back.
You know, I was struck by something when I was preparing to speak with you that about which I was unaware, that your mother was born in a concentration camp. And Phil, when I read that, I was floored. Just by the sheer depth of the atrocity of what your mother and your families had to go through. The fact that you're a first generation American, you know, you're a child of immigrants as well, right? Like, this is something that resonates, I know, a lot with you when it comes to the administration trying to come after our friends, our families, our community members, the people that we go to school with, that we work alongside, that we worship and pray with, right? They are being targeted. And Colorado specifically, is always attacked for, you know, being a quote sanctuary city, right? For being able to just be decent about people's human rights. But I read about your background and I had to ask you, you know, we have been talking about, and I'm unabashed about this, we really are seeing past being prologue, right? We are seeing echoes of fascism and 1930s Germany. I just did a piece recently because I went to Amsterdam and my family went to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. I mean, these are things that are stark and yet terrifying because, to your point, people are rolling over and they're being appeasers and they're not standing up to fight for the basic civil and human rights that we all deserve.
Let me share a few thoughts and thank you for giving me a chance to talk about my family story. America is a nation of immigrants. E pluribus unum is our model. Out of many, we are one. I'm proud of a Colorado story of Ralph Carr, a great governor of our state who during World War II refused to put Japanese Americans in internment camps and who said, Japanese Americans are welcome in Colorado. You are a citizen. We will protect you. That is a tradition that I believe in. And I don't know that we're going to get through this period easily, but I believe we're going to get through it because I believe in the America that welcomed my family here as refugees who'd survived the Holocaust. We often talk about the concept of calling someone an other, whether it's a Jew, someone who's Japanese American, someone who's gay, someone who's black, someone who's Muslim. And here's the honest truth. Any attacks on people based on who they are, rising hate against people, it doesn't stop with one group. It's very important. And I give a yearly talk commemorating a Baba Yar massacre where I really take some time to think about what it means to see rising hate in society. And what I have come to, we have to treat hate against any group as hate against all of us. Because had that happened, people would have acted sooner. And we could have and we would have saved lives. We need to make sure that we're not harming lives, whether it's people who are immigrants or LGBTQ community or others at a time when the America that I know and love is on the line. And that's why, yes, for me, this is very personal. And that's why the American dream is personal for me, because my family, we came here with nothing. And I've had the opportunity to become a lawyer and work for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to work for President Barack Obama in the White House, to be Attorney General, and to be Colorado's next governor, all in one generation. That's the America that we're fighting for, where no matter who you are, you can achieve your dreams.
It's pretty spectacular, right? If you just stop and you think about how far you've come and how far your family have come. How can people find out more information about your campaign? How can they support you? I have noticed, Phil, that even when I am talking about races that may be specific to certain jurisdictions, there is a national response. People really care about what's happening across the country. If there's one silver lining that's coming from a particularly chaotic and bad year under this administration, is that I do think people have been finding a sense of unity and coming together to help each other. So how can they help you?
Thank you, Katie. You know, a saying that is personal to me, comes from my faith, is you don't have the obligation to complete the work of repairing our world, but you're not free to desist from doing your part. And so your call to everyone who's part of this community, we all have a part to play. And I would encourage people, please adopt races for leaders who are going to represent our values, even outside where you may live, because we're all in this together. And we need states and leaders at the state level to make sure we're creating the type of state that, whether it's abortion rights, whether it's equality for the LGBTQ community, how we treat immigrants, how we take on climate, and so much more, that our values are being advanced. Learn more about my values, my vision at philforcolorado.com. You can share the information you can learn. Obviously, you can donate there. You can tell others you know in Colorado about our campaign. You can volunteer from afar, and you can also buy merch. Whatever works for you, however you want to lean in, we need your help. We welcome your help. Thank you for getting engaged. I often say our Democratic Republic is not a spectator sport. It's a team sport. We need everybody in the field.
That is right. I just recently interviewed Pastor David Black from Chicago, who was shot in the head with pepper balls by ICE. And he said, democracy is not a spectator sport. You are 100% right about that. Attorney General Phil Weiser, who is on track to be the next governor of the great state of Colorado. It has been an honor to spend time with you. I am inspired, as always, by the work you're doing. And thank you for carrying the torch for so many and for leading the charge to defend all of us across the United States, not just for those that are in Colorado.
Thank you. It's an honor to serve.
Katie, what does A Light in the Attic by Shel Silverstein, The Complete Book of Cats, The Complete Book of Dogs, Mouse, M-A-U-S, Calvin and Hobbes, what do any of those books have in common? Well, I'll clue you in. They have now all been banned in several counties in the state of Tennessee, and for stupid, god-awful reasons. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, we've talked about book banning before, and this is nothing new to you guys, but when you see something like, quote, The Complete Book of Cats being banned from a school, you know that there's seriously something that is wrong. So here's what's happening. In Monroe County, Tennessee, 574 books have been purged from their school libraries. In Knox County, more than 100 titles have been removed. More than 150 titles removed in Rutherford County. Over 300 books are banned in Oak Ridge schools, and over 400 titles have been removed in Wilson County. And that does not even account for every county in the state of Tennessee that has been impacted. All of this information has been provided gratefully by PEN America. If you're not familiar with PEN America, I urge you to go and check out their website. Their website is fantastic. And the reason why you need to go check out PEN America's website, and it's www.pen.org, is PEN America is at the forefront of the fight for the First Amendment to protect free expression in the United States and globally. And PEN America actually is an organization that several authors and writers are a part of because they also believe in the importance of the First Amendment and your freedom of expression. But what's wild about this Tennessee county ban is it is so indiscriminate. And listen, as you guys know, I'm from Florida, and Florida has one of the worst book bans in the country. So yes, Florida likes to say, hold my beer often to states like Texas and Tennessee. But Tennessee just goes to show exactly how completely indiscriminate and illogical their book ban is. So I'm going to read you, in 2024, the state legislature amended a state statute. It's entitled, quote, Age Appropriate Materials Act of 2022. And it specifies that any materials, quote, in whole or in part, that contain any nudity or descriptions or depictions of sexual excitement, sexual conduct, excess violence, or sadomasochistic abuse are inappropriate for all students and do not belong in a school library. So what does this mean, though? One, it means that you don't actually evaluate the text as a whole. They're only looking at certain portions of the text. And isn't that freaking convenient, right? It's convenient because if you're trying to apply an overly broad, vague, and unconstitutional statute, of course, this is a convenient way to craft the language of the statute, because then pretty much anything and everything, including the Complete Book of Cats and the Complete Book of Dogs, is going to fall within the purview of that. I'm not sure how, because it's just crazy, right? So what they're doing is these schools are taking just excerpts of books without context as a whole, and they're using it as a justification underneath this Tennessee statute to be able to remove books from school library shelves. So as I mentioned, Shel Silverstein's Light in the Attic, one of my kids' favorites, that's been banned. They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. That's also been banned. Hidden Figures, The American Dream, and the Untold Story of the Black Women Mathematicians Who Helped Win the Space Race by Margot Lee Shetterly. Gone, jettisoned off of school shelves in Tennessee. As of May of 2025, according to PEN America, at least 15 states, including Tennessee, have enacted laws facilitating the censorship of school library collections by expanding the definitions of terms like sexually explicit, obscene, and harmful to minors, requiring school districts to apply such terms in new ways or risk civil or criminal liability for materials with sexual content. The fear is the intention by them, right? If they intimidate you or they make you scared into submission, same type of shit we're seeing with these immigration raids, right? If they scare you into submission, same thing with abortions, right? I mean, this idea that if you don't interpret the law correctly, you could be facing civil or even criminal liability. What are you going to do? You're going to err on the side of caution, right? Especially if you're a school. Now, in Oak Ridge, which is an area in Tennessee, they actually had a book by a guy by the name of Richard Jolly, Jolley. The book was entitled Richard Jolly, Sculptor of Glass, a collection of works by the artist. Now get this. Richard graduated from Oak Ridge High School. He's an alumnus of Oak Ridge High School, and they don't even have his book on their shelves. Why? Because an Oak Ridge school spokeswoman told local news, quote, unfortunately, as an artist, Mr. Jolly's book features depictions of the human body that are in direct violation of the law. But you also, in these public school libraries, cannot read Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird or John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Mouse, The Hidden Children of the Holocaust by Esther Mustanowitz is gone. And The Secret Holocaust Diaries by Nona Bannister, also gone. I mean, what's left? I bet you the Bible. I bet you the Bible is left on the shelves in Tennessee. The Bible with its incredibly graphic depictions of sodomy, murder, sex, infanticide, patricide, matricide, every type of side, every type of homicide you could think of, every type of discrimination you can think of, sexual conduct you could think of. It's in the Bible. But the Bible's okay. Why? Because when you're a white Christian nationalist, you don't got a problem with your Bible staying on the bookshelves. But God forbid we learn about the Holocaust, or God forbid we learn about the celebrations of Black women, or God forbid we learn about dogs and cats. You would laugh if it didn't make you cry with the level of absurdity that is happening with this, right? And I want to know who is asking these officials in Tennessee, please provide what is so wrong about the book, the complete book of dogs and the complete book of cats. If it's ridiculous, it is. Let's talk about a lawsuit though. So Penn America in April of this year, just a couple of months ago, joined 3 students in Tennessee and their parents as plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit that was brought in the Rutherford County against the Rutherford County Board of Education. This is in Tennessee. This lawsuit challenges the book removals that happened in that county as well as restrictions. And this lawsuit alleges that these restrictions violate the First Amendment right of students to receive information and of the authors to express freely their opinions, their points of view, their perspectives, their art, right? The lawsuit alleges that the First Amendment has been violated because these books have been removed as a result of a Rutherford Board of Education policy banning sexually explicit books. The Board of Education removed or restricted more than 145 titles. And then this is utterly disgusting yet fascinating part about the lawsuit. So the school board, do you know what the school board did? Again, the school board didn't actually go through and have them go through each and every one of the books and read them and understand the context of the books, the historical significance, the cultural importance. None of that, right, came into play. Ready? The Rutherford Board of Education relied on reviews from Book Looks, a now defunct website developed by individuals associated with Moms for Liberty. Book Looks provided ratings for books, penalizing them as inappropriate if they contain, among other things, references to gender identity and sexual orientation, or so-called inflammatory, and that I put that in quotes, rhetoric about race. So yeah, you can't even have books about gender identity, sexual orientation. It is the literal whitewashing of history that's happening. And now it's the continued, frankly, whitewashing of education. Education in schools. I mean, that's the real irony here, right? That this book banning is happening in our schools where our kids are going to get an education. And the education doesn't have to be narrowly only down the path of what white Christian nationalists think is an education. An education includes different points of view, different expressions, different speeches, different, opinions about different people of different colors and different races and different religions and different genders. It is the literal melting pot of ideas from which our children learn. And the fact that you can't get access to books anymore like this in a public school. You may be able to get it in private school, I think. But so what does that mean? So if I can't afford for my child to go to private school, does that mean that my child will then now only have access to books that Moms for Liberty thinks are the kind of books that my child should have access to? Well, I don't want that. And what's wild is, by the way, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Do you guys remember that book? I mean, it's literally this, right? It's the criminalization of being able to actually own a book, physical book, read a physical book. There's only certain books that are countenanced or approved to be able to be read. I mean, this is the agenda. This is a Project 2025 policy. It's a pillar of Project 2025. The idea that you narrowly construe what constitute knowledge and information only through the lens of the white Christian nationalists. And it is no coincidence that these laws are being passed in red states with Republican-led legislatures. It's the Republicans, people. Don't let anybody ever tell you that it's anybody other than the GOP and the Republicans, because that would be a lie. That would be a lie. I want to urge you to support PEN America. I'm not getting paid by PEN America in any way, but I am an advocate. I'm an advocate of PEN America. We need an organization like PEN America to be able to fight for everyone's right to the First Amendment. Everyone's right. They're not saying that it's just for Democrats. They're not saying it's just for public school children. They're not saying it's just for, brown people, Asian people. They're saying that children should have the right to be able to get their information from a different set of books and sources and material. And authors should have the right of free expression in the way that they write their books, present their books, and create their books. And here's the other thing. Nobody is saying that what you do in the privacy of your home is going to be regulated. And yet, I feel like we're on the verge of that. I feel like we're on the verge of having the Trump administration come and knock on your door and go through your library of books at home, go through your iPads and your laptops and your computers to see what type of content you have. Because God forbid, your child is learning about the Holocaust. For an administration that is so fucking hot to trot about combating anti-Semitism, which I am a proponent of combating anti-Semitism, they certainly are quick to make sure that you don't learn about the Holocaust. The wholesale genocide and extermination of the Jews. Can't learn about it, but let's use the anti-Semitism banner to be able to do all sorts of stuff, including under the premise of immigration enforcement. The hypocrisy is rich. We have these conversations here at the Katie Phang News Channel because, again, book bans may not be new to you, but they're still happening, and they're happening at a disturbing and alarming pace. And we have to always remember that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can focus on things like bombings in Iran. We can focus on the decimation of our federal agencies. We can talk about the big bullshit bill, but we can also remind ourselves that book bans are wrong and they're unconstitutional. Be mad, be outraged, demand accountability, and go out and read the complete book of cats, the complete book of dogs, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Just go out and read. Read, people. Get an education. I'll see you on the other side.
I will fight every day to restore confidence and integrity to the Department of Justice and each of its components. The partisanship, the weaponization will be gone. America will have one tier of justice for all. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward or we're going to lose our country.
Yeah, I think the concern is that weaponization of the Justice Department may well occur under your tenure. And we want to make sure that that's not the case.
That was then nominee for Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, sworn to tell the truth under oath, testifying at her Senate confirmation hearing as to why she's not only qualified to serve as the Attorney General of the United States, but also her sworn answers to inquiries by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and Senator Coons as to whether or not she would weaponize the DOJ and whether or not she would honor her oath as a prosecutor. And you heard her in her own words. She said, no, I wouldn't. She also said she wouldn't weaponize or politicize the DOJ. And she also said that she would not continue in her role if she were to get a directive to do something illegal or unethical. And yet, as we see it here today on June 6, 2025, Pam Bondi remains the Attorney General of the United States. But I'm going to cut out the phrase of the United States. I'm going to say the Attorney General for convicted felon Donald Trump, because everything that she's been doing has not been for the benefit of the people of the United States of America. In fact, she, like other attorney generals that have served under felon Trump, they have sworn an oath of loyalty to him instead of to the country. She is not the personal attorney for Donald Trump. She is the attorney for the people of the United States, and she certainly has forgotten that role. And the people that have stepped up to remind her of that are some fantastic people like Norm Eisen, with whom I'm very lucky to work at the Democracy Defenders Fund. He, alongside the Lawyers Defending American Democracy, Lawyers for the Rule of Law, and a group of about 70 prominent attorneys, law professors, and former judges, have filed a scathing multi-page bar complaint in the state of Florida against Pam Bondi. To be clear, although Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of the United States, you have to be an attorney, and she is a barred and licensed attorney in the state of Florida. So when we talk about a bar, we talk about the organization in a state that issues the license to you. It's a professional license. It's called your bar license, and it allows you to practice law. You must be an attorney or a lawyer in good standing in a jurisdiction to be able to practice law in that jurisdiction. So if I don't have a license to practice in the state of Wisconsin, for example, I cannot practice there unless I am admitted based upon someone's recommendation and their guarantee that they will monitor the work that I do and that it will be appropriate and competent and professional. And so Pam Bondi has a Florida bar license. And so I want to also kind of clarify some concepts right here before we continue in our conversation. You have the Florida bar, that is the governing body. It is a nonpartisan governing body. You must be a member of the Florida bar in good standing to practice law in the state of Florida. This is in the state courts. Let me be clear. State court is different than federal court. So the Florida bar deals with state bar licenses. It is the governing body over your continuing legal education. You have to satisfy a certain minimum number of those credits to be able to continue to have a license in good standing in Florida. And a bar association is different. We sometimes hear them being used interchangeably, and that is incorrect. A state bar will deal with your license. A bar association is just a collection of attorneys. They can be state, federal, criminal, civil, whatever. But that is just a collection of attorneys. That's a voluntary organization. You can choose to be a part of your local bar association or not. A bar association, of course, also has its own concept of ethics as well, but they take that from the overarching state bar. And the reason why I give you this kind of mini education and how that is structured, and most specifically in the state of Florida, is I want you to understand the import of having this bar complaint filed. Bar complaints can be frivolous, people. They can be bullshit bar complaints. But when you see one like this, and the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because it is so meaty and it is just so significant. As I told you, it is a multi-page bar complaint. It is a total of 19 pages, and it is scathing in its allegations against Pam Bondi. And it makes it perfectly clear that she, in her role as Attorney General of the United States, has been compelling, coercing, and forcing Department of Justice lawyers to have to violate their, quote, ethical obligations under the guise of zealous advocacy. She issued a memorandum, people. On her first day in office, let's take a look at it because I want you to see exactly how absurd it is that on her first day of office as the Attorney General, this is the type of memorandum she issues to all of the department employees. And let me be clear, it wasn't just one memo, right? It was multiple memos. Some of the memos included the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how they're going to investigate as a part of the Department of Justice, the elimination of DEI, and how the pursuit of the enforcement of immigration actions from this administration, et cetera. But I want to focus on this one memo. It's called Zealous Advocacy on Behalf of the United States. And the technical title was, quote, General Policy Regarding Zealous Advocacy on Behalf of the United States. And it pretty much says, quote, the discretion afforded department attorneys entrusted with those responsibilities, that means the enforcement of criminal and civil laws enacted by Congress, but it also includes vigorously defending presidential policies and actions against legal challenges on behalf of the United States. So Bondi tells the attorneys and the people in the DOJ that are working there that the discretion afforded to the attorneys entrusted with those responsibilities does not include latitude to substitute personal political views or judgments for those that prevailed in the election. When Department of Justice attorneys, for example, refuse to advance good faith arguments by declining to appear in court or to sign briefs, it undermines the constitutional order and deprives the president of the benefit of his lawyers. Let's be clear, people. DOJ lawyers are not President Trump's lawyers. They're not. The fact that Bondi would put this into writing is a huge reason why she's looking at multiple bar complaints, but I digress for just a second there. The policy of the Department of Justice is any attorney who refuses to advance good faith arguments on behalf of the administration, well, there you go, they have to be good faith, or otherwise delays or impedes the department's mission will be subject to discipline and potentially termination consistent with applicable law. I mean, it ain't subtle, right? She made it pretty clear. If you don't go lockstep with what she wants, which is pretty much what Trump wants her to do, then you can look at termination, you can look at other disciplinary action, etc. So let's get back to that bar complaint because, again, it's very important. So the bar complaint says that not only has Bondi tried to coerce these lawyers under the guise of zealous advocacy, but that memorandum I just read to you, a portion of it that I read to you, it threatens lawyers with discipline or possible termination for falling short. Even though the rules of professional conduct that govern all attorneys say that you can be zealous, but only to a certain point, right? You can't ignore your ethics and the laws and your professional responsibility codes. You can't do that just in your pursuit of representing a client. Right? You can't do that. And this bar complaint makes it clear that Bondi has far exceeded the limits of acceptability when it comes to this kind of stuff. The bar complaint focuses on 3 specific cases within which department lawyers were terminated or forced to resign as a result of demands that they act unethically, those demands being made by Pam Bondi or members of her senior management team like, I don't know, Todd Blanche. I don't know, Emile Bove. You know, the guy that's being nominated to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals by Donald Trump? So, I want to also let you know that there are retired Supreme Court of Florida justices that have signed off on this bar complaint. That includes Barbara Pariente. That also includes James Perry and Peggy Quince. These are people that I know, that some of my cases have been in front of, and they have signed off on this. And the reason why I bring it up to you is there's also, for example, one of my former professors from the University of Miami, Tony Alfieri. He is the ethics guru, and he has signed off on this letter. Former United States District Court judge from Massachusetts, Nancy Gertner. I mean, these are real heavy hitters when it comes to the law. These are real people that have either served as judges, prosecutors, lawyers, criminal defense attorneys. I mean, if you look at the signees on this bar complaint against Pam Bondi, it runs the gamut. Professors as well. I mean, it is not just a very discrete group of people. It is more than 70 attorneys, professors, scholars, retired judges, former judges that are saying that Pam Bondi has acted unethically. They have signed their names to a bar complaint, people. This is not just some open letter that's been sent to the newspaper to complain about Pam Bondi. This is a bar complaint. This is a very serious thing. When you bring a bar complaint, you better be able to back it up because there's an investigation that sometimes follows, and we'll clarify that in just a minute, guys. But let's talk about this. The Justice Department Chief of Staff, when he was kind of asked to comment on this, and this is according to The Hill, In a statement, he said, his name is Chad Mizell. Remember that name. He said, quote, "The Florida bar has twice rejected performative attempts by these out-of-state lawyers to weaponize the bar complaint process against AG Bondi." He then goes on to say, "This third vexatious attempt will fail to do anything other than prove that the signatories have less intelligence and independent thought than sheep." Remember I just told you that there are former Florida Supreme Court justices, there's federal judges and other state court judges that have signed on this bar complaint? It's interesting, huh? How bold you are, Chad Mizell, to be able to say this. But I'm going to remind the viewers right now, Chad, of the following reality, because at the Katie Phang News Channel, we speak in truths and facts and evidence. So Chad Mizell's wife is a federal judge in the Middle District of Florida. Her name is Catherine Mizell. Maybe you've heard of her. Maybe you haven't, guys. But guess what? Catherine Mizell was appointed by Donald Trump, and the American Bar Association, during her appointment process, said the following: she's not qualified to serve as a federal judge. Remember how we covered this also a few days ago? That Pam Bondi has announced that the American Bar Association will not be a part of the judicial nomination and confirmation process anymore because, I don't know, Emil Bove has been nominated by Donald Trump. Well, yeah, there's another reason why, because the ABA says stuff like Chad Mizell, the Department of Justice Chief of Staff, his wife isn't even qualified to be a judge. So let's talk about three of the examples that have been brought up in these bar complaints so you understand why they are critical and very powerful examples of Bondi exceeding her ethical obligations and such. A veteran prosecutor resigned after refusing to investigate a Joe Biden-era contract without evidence. Without evidence. She appropriately said, "I am not going to investigate it." Erez Ravini was terminated after publicly objecting to the deportation and imprisonment in El Salvador of a man despite a court order prohibiting the action. We all know what that case was about. And of course, those numerous federal prosecutors, again, that we covered here at the Katie Phang News Channel that resigned at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, instead of dismissing or dropping the charges against Mayor Eric Adams, those illegal indicted charges against Eric Adams, instead of following the directive from Emil Bove and Todd Blanche to drop those charges, they resigned in protest because, I don't know, those were corruption charges against Eric Adams. There have been other bar complaints that have been brought against Pam Bondi. Early May 2025, two California U.S. representatives, David Min and Mike Levin, penned a letter to the bar urging a probe of Bondi's conduct, including her legally questionable positions and tactics in a case involving the deportation of Venezuelan nationals, and public statements that appear designed to undermine the judiciary and potentially endanger judges. Last month, progressive watchdog group Fact PAC launched a public campaign demanding the disbarment of Bondi, quote, due to potential violations of legal ethics and professional responsibilities. They included in that urging of a disbarment the fact that she failed to disclose her lobbying work for Qatar when she was working on Trump's legal team. Her efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Remember, she's an election denier, people. She worked on his legal team, Trump's. And her $25,000 contribution that was made by Donald Trump. It was Trump's $25,000 contribution to her political committee that she took from the Donald Trump Foundation in 2013 before her office, when she was the Attorney General of Florida, declined to join a lawsuit against Trump University. The Florida bar has rejected other ethics complaints, saying that it, quote, does not investigate or prosecute sitting officers who are appointed under the U.S. Constitution. Now that is a shirking of responsibility there, is it not? To which those Florida Supreme Court justices, Pariente, Perry, and Quince, you know what they said? They said that explanation is bunk, and it is, quote, unsupported by history or precedent. I wanted to bring this to your attention because there was a lot of Trump-Musk drama yesterday. And look, was it enjoyable to watch? Was it a little satisfying to see it happen? Sure it was. But was it a raging distraction from the rest of everything else that's going on? The answer is yes. While all of that is going on, the world continues to burn, courtesy of Donald Trump, and of course, courtesy of his billionaire buddy who is now getting divorced from, Elon Musk. But this bar complaint that was filed yesterday, it is significant in its heft, significant in its merits, significant in the number of signatories, and the significance of the people that are the signatories. I'm going to link that bar complaint so you guys can check it out. I want you to read it. because it is written with a level of urgency as well. We are just 19 weeks approximately into the second term of the Trump administration. We have another 3 and something years to go, people. We cannot allow the Department of Justice to be led by a lackey of Donald Trump. There is a phrase in Spanish, no hay pelo en mi lengua. There's no hair on my tongue. I am speaking to you, Pam Bondi. I'm speaking to you because you are a member of the Florida Bar. You have an obligation to follow your ethics, to follow not only your internal moral compass, but you also have a code of professional responsibility that you have sworn to protect and to, preserve the integrity of. That's not happening. That's not happening when members of the DOJ that work there feel like they have to resign or else. When the memos that are issued threaten them with disciplinary proceedings, investigations, and or firing if they don't do a directive. That's the type of shit you see in a dictatorship, right? In an autocracy. That's the type of shit you see. So folks, check it out, because what's going to happen now is once the Florida Bar gets a complaint, it does kind of an immediate review of whether or not it's going to proceed with an investigation against the person that is being complained against whom the complaint is being filed, The Florida Bar does have some discretion in making that decision. I just read to you that prior bar complaints that the Florida Bar said that they don't think it's within their purview to do this, but you just heard 3 Supreme Court justices from the Florida Supreme Court, retired, now say that's BS. They call BS and they say, yes, you can, Florida Bar. So Florida Bar can do this. Will they do it? We will follow along and watch it closely. But if the Florida Bar does decide to pursue an investigation into this bar complaint into Attorney General Pam Bondi, then it can assign a prosecutor that will look into it and will prosecute the claims and will do an investigation. I used to be the chair of a Florida Bar grievance committee. There are committees that are set up all over the state of Florida. It's led by a chair. It's also led by members of the grievance committee. They are appointed. And we would take the bar complaints that were sent to us by the Florida Bar and they would be assigned to us and we would investigate them. We had subpoena power. We had investigatory power. As members of the Florida Bar, we not only have to self-report violations, but we also have to make sure that we are reporting violations as we see them occur. These are not out-of-state complainants anymore, Chad Mizell. These are people within the state of Florida. There are people that have a vested interest across the United States, though, outside of the confines of the state of Florida, that care about justice and they care about whether or not the Department of Justice is led by somebody who will be fair and impartial. So that's why the Florida Bar must, not should, it must investigate Attorney General Pam Bondi. These allegations, they have now been made public. We have seen very publicly resignation letters, statements made publicly by former federal prosecutors feeling pressured to be able to do a directive that they find to be unethical. There's evidence there, should be pursued. People, be mad, be outraged, demand accountability, because that's what I'm doing here. I am mad, I am outraged, I demand accountability every single freaking day on my behalf and on your behalf. I'll see you on the other side.